Welcome to Spring Office Hours, Season 3, Episode 14, Spring Boot Front Ends. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, joined by my good friend and colleague, DaShaun. DaShaun, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm still riding the wave from Nexus last week. I'm doing great.
Nice.
Things are
We're
good.
going to
I'm
get
having
in.
great conversations today. This is my favorite time of the week.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. Today is April 15th, tax day, so I hope everybody has got their taxes submitted. Not a fun day for some, maybe a fun day for some. But today we have an interesting conversation ahead of us. We are talking about Spring Boot front ends and really building full stack or web applications in conjunction with Spring. So we're going to do a lot of fun. We're going to do something fun here. We're going to kind of take what we did in a previous episode where we put together a list of learning resources for Spring. We're going to do that for the front end. We're going to talk about all the things you might come across in the front end at a high level. We're not going to dive deep into these. We'll put a list of resources together after the show that we can have to go ahead and share out with the community. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to being back at work. I was not on last week's show. I did catch last week's show because I edited it for the podcast. So awesome show last week on conferences, which led you were on Monday, you were in a conference talk on Spring Office Hours, and then you left for Atlanta, Dev Nexus. I was really sad not to be there, but only a little bit sad because I was on vacation with the wife and the family, and it was great to be on the beach in good weather. I know we are in the same kind of weather pattern. We don't get good weather around here until about now. So it was great to be in Florida on the beach in the hot sun with a drink in my hand and no laptop. I didn't even look at work. So that was fun.
There's so many people that I know because of you. There's so many people, when we were doing these conferences, there's so many people that I know because of you, and it was fun. And a little, everybody, you're clearly missed because, I'll say 1 in 10 people that I met, I know because of you. So they're like, where's Dan? Where's Dan? I was like, I don't know. Is he in India or is he, he's on vacation. Then they're showing me, no, here's pictures. Here, they're showing me pictures of you on vacation. I'm like, okay, so now we know.
Yep.
But it was fun, right?
That was fun.
That part for me.
Dev Nexus is such a great conference, probably one of my favorite Java conferences, and the location, we've been at that Marriott across from the park right there. Me and you have run through the park.
Yep.
It's a great location.
I walked it this time,
nice.
But it was still good. Last year I was kind of listening and preparing. I was listening to notes and previous talks, preparing for my presentation. I did the same thing because it worked out pretty well last year.
Yeah.
And yeah, just that walk. It is nice. I really enjoy Atlanta, all the way around. It was a good time. And you said it's one of your favorite conferences. It is definitely one of my favorite conferences. It is in what I call my big three, my top three. There's definitely more, but those are the three that kind of stand out. And there's a next tier of conferences that I love and that I'm going to support as much as I can, but those are the three.
Which are the three? Yeah. So we have Dev Nexus, Spring
Dev
One,
Nexus, and Spring IO.
Spring IO. Awesome.
Yes. Not
I think we'll be at Spring IO possibly. So.
I'm hoping, if things work out, sometimes things don't work out, right? Yeah. We can make plans to travel and go and meet the community all over the world, but sometimes things don't work out.
That's a good segue into something. I am not going to be in India next week. My plans were to be at GIDS, the Great International Developer Summit. Had a whole bunch of problems with a very frustrating visa process on obtaining one of those visas. So it turns out I'm not going to be able to make it, which
I was excited.
Very disappointing.
I know. Be in India next week. I really was excited for you to be in India next week.
I was looking forward to, I was telling you before the show, the idea of being in India around so many amazing developers, so many amazing speakers at GIDS was really exciting for me. The 24-hour flight to India wasn't that exciting, but it's very frustrating, but life should move on. Life will move on. We'll try again next year, hopefully, and hopefully I can get back there. So I want to hear more about Dev Nexus.
So let's
let's talk about like keynotes, talks that you were able to attend.
I had my session track all laid out. I had my plan for when I was going to hang out at the booth, which sessions I was going to see, and on Wednesday, day one of the talks, that plan went out the window. I wanted to go see Brian Sambodin's talk with AI and Redis. And it was one of the first talks in the morning.
Awesome.
And I was at the booth and I'm talking with the community. I was having an office hours talk. And immediately I was late for the first session. So instead of saying, hey, Brian, I missed your session, or walking in late, I said, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to miss everybody's session. I'm not going to go to any of the talks. And I said it right there because I was having so much fun hanging out at the booth and interacting with people, even when there was, sessions. There's that one person that found it more important to hang out with Chris, for example, Chris Bono or DaShaun. Like, we had these amazing people, Jonathan, the whole team was there. We just had an awesome booth, tons of expertise. And there was people that were not going to the sessions because they were having these deep, valuable conversations. And I wanted to be a part of that. So I went to one session the whole time, but I feel like I didn't miss a thing.
Yeah.
Because the sessions that I wanted to go see, I pulled them aside and said, like, hey, like, what were the key points? What did you do? And we're lucky. I'm lucky to get to have that type of relationship. And it was great. So I feel like I didn't miss anything. And the one session that I did go to was best speaker award at the end of the day. So I was really happy. Jonathan did his spring observability talk.
Awesome.
And he added something that I had done a long time ago, but he did it in a much better spring-centric way, and I got really excited about it. He updated his T-House repo, which we've talked about here many times. And the thing that he did was I don't know if I want to give it away. I'm going to. He added to where when an error happens, a sound plays. He used the Java's MIDI sequence, MIDI tools to play sounds and the different instruments over his speaker. And he did that. So like he runs his load test and then you hear the errors that are popping up. And you also he used Proxy. What is it?
Proxy. I know what you're talking about.
To like change and rate limit, throwing chaos at a system. So it changed how fast calls are going through, and you could just hear it. And not only could you see it on the screen, but you could hear it. And it was awesome. It was just, he delivered it so well, and his jokes all hit, and it was fantastic. And he presented really, really quickly. Like I get to watch, right? He's presenting at a near Josh Long pace, right? And he put so much content into his presentation, and he was taking questions along the way. He just did a great job.
That's awesome.
So I got really lucky in that.
Well, I can't wait because usually DevNexus posts these on YouTube. So I'll be looking forward to that so I can see your talk and his. How did your talk go?
My talk was good. I had a really, a good size audience. My slides didn't go real well, so I was just showing my markdown. But it was a conversation. There was great questions. Nice. I talked about Spring Modulith, and I've been talking about that a lot over the past few weeks in front of customers. Yep. And after my talk, I had multiple conversations at the booth and around the booth.
Nice.
Where we're opening it up and we're looking at code and we're talking about how Spring Modulith can help go forward. And now today, Spring Modulith, just like the actuator, if I go to start.spring.io, I'm adding the actuator, I'm adding GraalVM, and from here forward, I'm adding Spring Modulith because there's so much benefit. And there's no reason not to, right? It's going to help me in the future.
I got an advanced screening of your talk last week with a customer, 2 weeks ago with a customer. So I saw it; it was really good. So I'm sure it went over really well. So I can't wait to see the replay on that as well. I also saw just so I know, I saw the pictures from the Spring booth. The booth looked amazing. I think it was right next to the escalators that go down to like the lunch hall,
cafeteria,
right? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted, not being there, I'm trying to picture things, and that's where I thought it was.
Great location. The booth was awesome. The demos were great, and the conversations, right? Beyond the booth, It was the conversation,
Yeah.
the quality
Yeah.
of conversations that were had. And here's something else. You're at a conference, you have this ability to go and talk to the presenters and the other experts and the vendors. Like you're using vendor. You have a chance to go and talk and get your questions answered. Don't
Mhm.
miss out on that opportunity.
It
Go.
is so crucial. And like, yes, you are paying, some of you are paying money. Some of your companies are paying money for you to be there to like learn, right? So take the opportunity to learn, but bigger than that is connecting. I saw it firsthand when I was in Atlanta for the Java user group there. Somebody had come up to me and said, hey, you know, I'm like on the job hunt. Like, what should I be doing? And I'm like, not talking to me. There are 80 other people here in the Atlanta area that are at this user group meeting. Connect with people. Find out what other people are up to, where they work. Are there openings at that place? Like, make sure you are making those connections. Everything in my career that has happened, I mean, somehow everything has kind of worked its way out, but it's always because of connections that I've made with people. Like, and some that I didn't even know, like 4 years down the line, would come into play. So be out there, even if we're introverts, we're all developers. Talk to each other, make those connections, and things are going to work out good. So
Fantastic.
cool. So why don't we get into today's show? I want to do a couple things. I wanted to look at the calendar. I want to talk about Spring One CFP, and then we'll get into some front end development. How about that?
Fantastic.
Do you want to share your screen and go to calendar? Yeah. All right, let's do that.
Let's do this. Boom.
All right. So for those of us who are not aware, calendar.spring.io, great place to go ahead and look at all the things that are happening in the Spring ecosystem. It's got a release calendar of all the projects. And yeah, there are a lot of things going on this week, aren't there?
Jonathan, if you're just joining us, thank you for being here, first of all. And I already was bragging about your presentation, your award-winning presentation last week at Nexus.
Award-winning.
Yes.
So a lot going on this week. And also, I think something happened last week on Thursday when I was away. Yes, Spring Framework 6.2.0, the first milestone, was released last week. So if you want to go ahead and take a look at that, you can jump in and see all of the things that are there. This is going to be the milestone. This is going to be the base for Spring Boot 3.3, which will be coming out mid
RC1.
or end of next month.
RC1 is coming out this week.
Oh, there we go. I didn't even see that.
Yep.
So yeah, RC1. We talked about a lot of the milestone releases, right? Was that 2 weeks ago? We talked about some of the things coming in Spring Boot 3.3. Those are all kind of combined now. We have an actual release candidate this week on Thursday. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. And we will go ahead and plan for a show next month where we talk about Spring Boot 3.3 in a little bit more detail than we were able to last week. So look forward to that.
Here's a good, actually, calendar, one more time, calendar.spring.io. Remember that. Mark it, bookmark it. It's important.
Yes.
It's important
actually,
looking forward.
Actually, you don't even need to bookmark it, DaShaun. You can go over to our learning resources that we have on our GitHub repository, and you can import all the bookmarks of Learning Spring, one of which is calendar.spring.io.
Excellent idea.
I will get that in the show notes. If you haven't seen that episode or seen that repository, I'll make sure to add that to the show notes today so that you can go ahead and get all of those wonderful resources we've worked so hard on, that the community has gone ahead and submitted to, and that we have now have like 625 stars on that repo, which is amazing to me.
It is amazing. I want to remind everybody, if you're new here, thank you. We're happy that you're here. I want to remind everybody that this is office hours, right? If you're here live, we want you to get your questions asked. Get them into the chat. If we don't answer it right away, know that we will try to get to it. So I'm putting stars on some of these questions that might fit better when we have another topic that's on the agenda. So ask your questions. If you come to my house for dinner and you leave hungry, that's your fault. You're here at the live stream. You can get your questions in. If you don't, that's your fault. Don't leave hungry. So get your questions asked.
All right. So another thing we wanted to share is the Spring One CFP. Spring 1, we're going to be in Vegas. DaShaun just mentioned his 3 favorite conferences. Mine too. Spring 1, number 1 on that list for sure. We're going to be in Vegas for VMware Explorer. Spring 1 will be there. This year it's a little bit different. We had like a whole dedicated like Monday track. We are going to be split throughout the 4 days that we're there. So you're going to find Spring on every day, which is really exciting for me. So now that's going to be a lot of fun. This starts with the CFP. The CFP is going to close soon, May 3rd. That is right around the corner. So if you want to be there, if you want to speak there, if you want to share your ideas, we need to get those CFPs in, me included, DaShaun. I have not submitted to this yet. I've got to go ahead and get mine submitted soon.
I want to give a shout out here. I was just on a call with Colin. Colin, I'm glad that you're here. I was just on a call with Colin. Colin took me up on my offer to get some help. I'm reviewing his abstract. We're having a conversation about what we can do. We're here to help. We are here at your service. We want to see you presenting at Spring 1. But for any conference, if you've got questions or you'd like some help on your abstract or on your presentation, we are here to help. Colin, thank you so much for being here. If you are thinking about submitting and you would like some help, call us.
Don't be like everyone else using ChatGPT. Use DaShaun GPT, all right? It's DaShaun much better.
GPT. Thomas says, what session type should I choose for Spring 1 CFP? They are very confusing. Thomas, is a great question. I'm not sure what your topic is, but we can help you.
Yeah, I'll maybe we could share some more information on next week's show, because as I just said, I have not submitted mine yet. I'm going to do that this week. Let me dive into that, and we can even ping you offline here, Thomas, and talk about that.
Absolutely.
One more thing I didn't have on my list today before we get into front ends. I remember seeing this, and we didn't put it on our list of things in the news. And I'm wondering if you can find this while I talk about it. Spring Academy is now free for everyone.
It is.
This is not there was a Spring Academy free tier and a Spring Academy Pro tier that you had to pay for that gave you more courses and the certification exam voucher, right? Now everything is free. The certification voucher you need to pay for, right? I haven't had a chance to dive into this, but this is really exciting for me.
It is really exciting. So the number one question that we get, right, is like, hey, how do we learn more? What do we need to do? And there's a question here from Rabah. Hello, is the Spring certification worth it? Here's what you can do. You can go and take all of the courses, and you can do all that for free. You don't have to commit. You can go and learn all of the things, and you can decide after you've consumed all of this content, after you've learned all the things, you can decide whether it's worth it or not to pay the $299, I think it is, to go and take the test. You can decide. I'm here to tell you, and I think we've got a few people in the audience here that will be happy to tell you that it's worth it. Mm-hmm. That it's worth doing.
We've talked, I think we've mentioned this probably a handful of times on this show. So the idea of any certification in any field, like, is it worth it? And for me, the piece of paper that you get, obviously, is not worth it. Like, the journey to get there, that is what you're going to get out of it. Unless you are someone who can just sit down and like map out your own certification path and learn all of those things and kind of tell someone that you've learned all those things, then great. For me, the certification is, hey, I'm working towards a goal, and this, like going through Spring Academy and learning all these things, getting to that point, the journey is better than the destination in this case, or most cases, right? When you run a half marathon,
the destination,
right? When you run a half marathon or a marathon, right? That half marathon day is, I mean, it's hard, but it's not the hard part. The hard part is like all the training that goes into that. And I see that similar to like certifications, like all the training you put into learning all of those things. The destination is just that certification or that piece of paper. So absolutely worth it if you want to kind of further your skill set, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So those are all my things in the news. I don't know what your schedule is like, DaShaun, but maybe we'll go a little bit longer today because we have a lot of things to.
I got time. If you've got time, I got time.
I got time as well. All right. So I want to talk about front-end frameworks today, front-end development, web development. And we did this in a previous session. We had our learning resources. and we said, how can we kind of like put these into buckets, and like what are some of the best learning resources for these? So what I want to do today is I have a list of things that I want to talk about. DaShaun and I both kind of put this list together. And what we want to do is maybe we'll do like an Excalibur where we can kind of put these into buckets and talk about them with the community and say, hey, what bucket does this go in? What bucket does that go in? Talk about them at a high level. And then what we'll do is we'll take this and turn this into a repository that I've already created that I'll leave in the show notes. And this will be a way for like, hey, I'm interested in building a front end for my Spring Boot application. What are my options? What are some resources for learning those different options? And then maybe some like, hey, why do you choose one over the other? So I think just a really great resource for the community to get into on how to build some front-end applications. So I want to start with kind of web development. And I don't know everybody's journey out there, but I've been doing web development since I started 23 years ago. And it's like the exciting part for me. Like I love being a Java developer, but I love the instant gratification of being able to publish something to the web, right? Like a UI, a front end. You can't go show your family or your wife or your mom like, hey, look at this back end code that I wrote. They don't know it. They probably don't know what that does, right?
Yeah.
But like the web is like this instant gratification of I get to just push something out there and somebody can see something I've done. That's why I've had a personal website like since the beginning, because I like being able to have a presence online, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to say this. This is a thing that I noticed in my career. I'm happy on the back end. I'm happy connecting things and building, systems. Yeah. And one thing I noticed is my manager couldn't really tell how much work I was doing. They couldn't really tell what I was doing. They had no visibility into the value that I was delivering. Yet, somebody that I might consider delivering less work, lower quality work, they put a front end on it, and they're able to show their work and give a presentation that somebody can use and understand. I watched their career move faster than mine. So if nothing else, there's a value here in making your work visible, making your work consumable, and having a front end on it, because not everybody can easily understand your repositories relating to your services and the annotations that you're putting on the code and the value that delivers. They can't easily consume your actuator endpoints and how valuable that is. So I want you to listen to us here talk about this, and I want you to consider the value of being able to put a front end, no matter how flashy or not, the value of putting a front end on the work that you're doing and what that could do for your career.
I like that you mentioned that too, whether it's flashy or not. Like, how strong are you with CSS and modern web development? The idea of like a full stack developer has always been like kind of the mountaintop peak for me. Like, can I be that full stack developer? It is really, really hard today to know everything on the front end, on the back end, in like DevOps. You can't know it all. You can have some breadth though across this. Like some of the things we're going to talk about today is just give you a high level of like, what are your options on the front end? So that if you want to go deep into something specific, you can. But for any of my like junior developers out there, people in year 1 or 2, and you're getting overwhelmed by the idea of being a full stack developer, it is a myth, people. It is, you can have a breadth, but you are not going to be like the best of everything on the front end, everything on the back end, everything on the DevOps side. Like, it's just really hard to do. Maybe there's some unicorns out there, but it's really hard to do. So the next best thing for me is we are specialized at being Java developers. We are Spring developers, but we want to build a front end on something. And what are those options out there for us? So that's really what I want to talk about today.
I agree.
Cool.
And I'm again, I want you, audience, I want you to think about the coolest thing that you've done in your career. And I want you to think about how easy was it to show it? How easy was it to show your manager, your customer, your peers, the work that you did? That's it. I want you to have this conversation with that in mind.
Cool. All right. So let's go to Excalibur and start with a
Yeah.
couple buckets here.
I went
want to
here. I went
start.
to start.spring.io,
Oh,
and
sorry.
I wanted to just show like, hey, here's some stuff that maybe you've seen, right? It's on the menu. Vaadin, right? It's been on the menu for a long time. Hilla, newer, it's on the menu. We have for template engines, we have Thymeleaf and Apache FreeMarker and Mustache and Groovy templates. These are some things that might be on your radar because you've been at start.spring.io.
Yep. And I think I just want to point out too, on the flip side, there are things that might not be there at start.spring.io that we can definitely recommend. So we'll talk about those things today as well. So I think I want to do like some different buckets, right?
Okay.
So I want to start with web development, just in general, because these are like the technologies that you need to like build some of these out.
All right.
So web development for me, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is a landscape, and again, I want to get some resources into the README for this as well. This is, if you've been doing this 20 years, these three buckets have changed drastically over the years. So really just trying to stay up to date with some of the things, again, not staying up to date with everything, but when it comes to HTML, try to take a look at things like semantic HTML. Instead of using divs everywhere, let's use some elements that have some meaning to them. On the CSS side, a lot of things have changed. There are new frameworks out. Like we've used Bootstrap forever, but there are things like Tailwind that really make development with CSS a little bit more enjoyable. And then on the JavaScript side, that is the ever-changing landscape of the web. But just kind of staying up to date with like, what is the latest ECMAScript standards? What are the latest like features? So those things. So I'll kind of put some links into there, but I think we all kind of understand those. That's like the backbone of building web applications, right? So with that, the first bucket I wanted to create was kind of JavaScript frameworks, right? These are the things that we've heard of, and I want to talk about these at a high level real quick, and not like when you should choose one or the other. Well, maybe we can get into that later, but let's just talk about these.
Okay.
So from a JavaScript framework, I'm just going to list a few because we could probably list, there's like 20 of them,
Yeah.
but I'm going to say like
and it'll
React,
change tomorrow.
Yeah. So React, Vue, Angular, and Svelte. I'm going to put those. I'm not leaving any out on purpose. Those are just kind of my top 4 right there. Now, React people get mad at me when I call React a framework because it's not a framework, DaShaun. And that is a pro and a con for me. From a pro side, you kind of get to pick the pieces that you want to like build out your application on the, in React. But they're going to tell you it's not a framework. But okay. Vue is a big one for me. I've been in the Vue ecosystem for a long time now. I helped write curriculum for a bootcamp on Vue. So I have some experience with Vue from the beginning and integrating that with Spring. I'm a big fan of Vue because it kind of puts everything into a single file component where it's like, here's my HTML, here's my JavaScript, here's my markup. So I have some resources on that I'll share. Angular, I've been at some enterprises where Angular is really used in the enterprise a lot more than I see other frameworks, right? I listed React first because if you go look at like, if you're looking for a job with a JavaScript framework, right, like React is at the top of that list. Vue is my favorite, but Angular is really big in the enterprise space. So there have been some interesting things going on with Angular too, with signals. They've been doing a lot of really cool recent updates. And then Svelte, kind of the new kid on the block, but they also have some really nice features. Very similar to Vue for me. I haven't played around with Svelte a lot, but similar to Vue in some of the things that they do. Yeah, so that's JavaScript frameworks. Now, again, not to when to use them, but some of the reasons you might use them. Hey, we have a separate front-end team from our back-end team. And if that front-end team doesn't know Java and they know, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, like those are the technologies that they're going to use, right? Also, if we're building front-end frameworks, building our front-end in one of these frameworks, that's typically not typically, but let's just say typically it might be a separate application than our Spring application. We could combine those, but usually, not say usually.
Right. It depends on
Typically,
your
those do that.
organization, right?
Yeah, yeah,
If
it
your
does.
front end team is separate, if you've got a team in the other building that does the front end and does the UI and is adhering to all the brand standards someplace else, then
Yep,
typically it's going to be delivered as a separate app. And you're
yep,
going to have to
yep,
expose some API that they can consume easily. And
yep,
that's how we land on this REST interfaces and the like, right?
yep. All right, so that's kind of my JavaScript frameworks bucket. Again, we'll come back to that. My next bucket I want to talk about is just Java, right? We're Java developers, we're Spring developers, but just at a Java level, what are some of the tools that we can use to build out front-end applications? I think it starts with Vaadin. I don't know if you can head over to Vaadin. Is it Vaadin.com or Vaadin?
Start.vaadin.com, I
Start.
believe, right?
No, Vaadin has it's just Vaadin.com. Vaadin announced a new website today, and I just saw Marcus and Lawrence posted this. It is beautiful. So go ahead and check out that website. There's some really great resources there.
Right. But start.vaadin.com, this is where we can go and we can build projects similar to the Spring Initializer. You can go and bootstrap, initialize a Vaadin project.
Yep. So I'm going to save Vaadin there. Now, somebody in the chat has already cut me down. I was going to say Jakarta Faces, aka Java Server Faces.
Sorry.
I wanted to add that to the list. Again, I don't have a ton of experience with this, but I am curious to hear from the audience. Is anyone still using JSF? Is somebody using Jakarta Faces? And again, I know in some of the legacy apps we've seen that we've had that we've dealt with at least on the Spring side with customers. So this is supposed to be an interactive discussion. We want to hear from you, like what kind of technologies are you using? What kind of buckets can we put these in? Somebody said JSP is fine, right?
I said, right, like I don't get surprised. Here's the thing. Java's been around for a long time. The JVM has made it so that we can still run the things that we developed in the 90s. They can still run on the Java 22 JVM. So I'm no longer surprised by the old technologies that we've long since forgotten that they're still running in production. I'm a little concerned, but not for the reasons that you think, not because of the development experience. I'm concerned more about the security, but the JVM is amazing. Java just keeps on getting better. And these things that we took to production years or even decades ago, we can still run. And lots of companies are still doing it.
Now, I will say, unless there is a reason to use it inside your organization, if you are starting a new greenfield project, I probably wouldn't reach for JSP. There are much better options these days. But if you have to upkeep some legacy applications or keep things running, I completely understand that. Okay, just looking through the comments right now.
Yeah.
All right, so those are kind of those are my buckets for like pure Java, right? I'm wondering where we can put this other bucket. I have a bucket of Java full stack frameworks, and this is where both Hilla and something like JHipster come into place. These are really great frameworks to like get you up and running with like a front end framework and Spring on the back end and kind of put all of those pieces together for you. So do you want to include those in Java, or do you want to like start a new bucket for like Java full stack frameworks?
Java plus plus.
There you go. So let's do Hilla and JHipster in there.
Hilla. And for those that don't know Hipster, right. When I think JHipster, I think of others. I think of AppFuse from the years ago, and I think of Spring Roo. These things that were not just kind of building a UI, they were ways that we could build kind of the domain, and we got our UI included. And another one is Apache Causeway. This is on my radar because I've had some recent discussions and modularizing and modernizing applications. Some of these tools, what's in this bucket is going to make it easy. And again, this is just my perspective. It's going to make it easy for you to take that domain model that's working, that you built your business on and has been running for decades, and give it a new look, give it a more modern front end. And all three of these in this bucket are good options for something like that.
So I know I haven't had a lot of experience with Hilla. Hilla's from the same team at Vaadin, and it just takes a little bit of a different approach. So, and actually, I don't know if we talked a little bit of. Let's talk a little bit more about Vaadin at a high level, because I don't think we jumped into that bucket over there. So Vaadin at a high level is going to allow you to write your front ends in pure Java. So there's a whole Java API, there's an SDK that you can pull in, and hey, I just get to write Java code that creates these nice front ends, and it has all of the UI components that you might think that you would need in an application, right? Like, hey, there's a table, there's a form, there's a list, there's all the things that you would need to kind of build out a front end application, and you can write it just in Java. And that has some really good pros to it, right? Pros is like, hey, if we're an all Java shop and we don't have that separate team, that front end team that's working on the React or Vue or Angular component side, then we have the developers with the capabilities to go ahead and create these types of applications. And these are not limited to, but typically, like if you wanted to just spin up a quick MVP or some type of back office application where you're like managing some data, right? This is a really good use case for that. And I'm a big fan of Vaadin. We've talked about Vaadin a lot on the show. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of Vaadin for me at a high level.
Yeah. For me, like I added Google Web Toolkit.
Yeah.
Right. This was I can write things in Java and it will generate HTML, CSS, JavaScript for the front end. This is still used. This is still a popular tool. But I kind of put those two in the same bucket where I just want to do Java. I want to give my front end, some look and feel. I want to be able to show things off. And as a Java developer, as a Spring developer, these are options that I have. I have not used GWT in a while. Vaadin, again, you saw Vaadin is easy for me, and it clicks for me. And there's tons of things that are already like on the menu. I can just kind of like pick things from their collection, from their library, and I can cover most of my use cases.
Yep.
So yeah.
So Hilla on the other side of that, if you wanted to integrate something like React with Spring, Hilla is going to make you be able to build that full stack application together in one app without having to like kind of build those two separate apps yourself or put those together yourself. So Hilla has some really nice features for doing that. And again, you get to use a lot of those same components. Like, hey, I want to bring in a data table. I want to bring in a list, a form. And yeah, so there's some really cool things there. I haven't had a chance to dive into that yet. Again, on my list of things to do. But if it's anything as easy as Vaadin is, I would expect that it's pretty awesome.
So there's a couple of concerns. I feel like the Vaadin and Vaadin Flow, Hilla, I feel like this, I think I heard this mentioned that Hilla is kind of Vaadin Flow or one of the other. No, I think it's Vaadin Flow and Hilla. I think Vaadin is the big umbrella, and then it's either Vaadin Flow or Hilla. So I think when we do this, at least Hilla's over here, and I think this is Vaadin Flow.
Right. Vaadin is the company. Yes. Yeah. We talked to Lawrence about this. He did clear some stuff on that. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Vaadin, the company, these two projects in particular, check out our archives on springoffstars.io. We did a really great episode with Lawrence from Vaadin. So, okay, I do want to mention JHipster again. I got into JHipster early on, and I think one of the benefits for me with JHipster was it was this full stack framework that was putting these two things together. And if you do nothing more than generate a project from JHipster and just take a look at the source code, I think it's so useful because I learned like how to kind of integrate the front end and the back end. They also have like security in there, so you can like figure out how security fits into it. I found it to be just like a really great learning resource. even if I wasn't using it for something. So, but now this is, I mean, I was into JHipster like 10 years ago. This is way down the line now. I think I had a course on JHipster's website that pointed to like our Angular and JHipster course. But there's a lot of good stuff on JHipster now. One thing I love is I want to make sure I get this right, but I'm pretty sure Matt Rabel has joined them like officially. Like Matt has always been a contributor to JHipster and shows it off in all his demos, but I think he's like officially there now.
I think he's taken on a kind of a project
bigger
ownership role.
And that's great news for JHipster.
Speaking of Matt Rabel, I've been a fan of his since early on, since way back in JRoller Weblogger. I found one of his themes that I used back in, I'm going to say like 2002. Nice. Is when I became a Matt Rabel fan, and he was at Nexus last week. But he also put out a framework called AppViews that did a similar thing. And for me, I take the journey that I had with AppViews and being able to build these fully featured applications from a domain design and give, the 90% of the features and functionality that I needed that we're trying to do, right? We don't have to do magic. If we're given a problem space, a use case, a lot of times what you and I do is we take some simple pojos and we build use some known patterns, some conventions like repositories and services. We take these concepts that we've been using for years and we glue them together. We're not doing magic. And JHipster kind of takes that one step further and it says, hey, we'll do all those things. We get it. If you're using the 80% coverage case, we can do a lot of those, boilerplate, the simple stuff. We can do that for you. And we can get you a lot of momentum and movement forward and give you something that you can show off out of the gate. And that's powerful. So I glue these two together in my head, in my journey, AppViews and JHipster. And yes, Matt Rabel is taking a much bigger role inside of
that. Means it's only going to get better. So I'm excited about that. Cool. Okay. So anything else here in this bucket that you want to add to it, or anyone else in the audience have anything to add to this bucket? Going once, going twice.
Yeah. We have some examples. I think these are good.
All right, cool. So my next bucket is going to be Spring template languages. So here's the idea. We can go ahead and build out a Spring MVC application, right? Spring MVC has been there for a while. We can create a controller. We can go ahead and take our data. We can go ahead and send a response down as HTML. We kind of build this HTML template. And we can use different template languages. So I have Thymeleaf, Mustache, Groovy, FreeMarker. These are the ones you'll find on the Spring Initializer. And as our good friend Thomas pointed out to me today, JTE. So I have not had a chance. I don't think I've ever used JTE. Pretty new on my radar, but it stands for Java Template Engine. And so these are the different template engines that you can use if you're just using Spring MVC and you want to have a controller endpoint that kind of builds your data and sends it down and integrates some kind of template language. And this will allow you to build a full stack Spring app. So you have one artifact that you're kind of deploying to production that has your front end and your back end all kind of rolled into one.
There was a question here about velocity. I think velocity, I definitely have used velocity in the past, but I'm not sure velocity is getting maintained anymore. That's my question. And Jonathan says, hey, if FreeMarker's there, should velocity be too? And that was my only thing is is velocity still getting maintenance? I'm not sure. So yeah.
Yeah.
We'll put it on there. We'll discover more and we'll talk about it later.
This is why we wanted to do this interactive, because I have not used all of these. From the template list, I have used Thymeleaf, Mustache, and Groovy. I have not used any other ones. So, Thomas, I have it on the list. Hold your horses. But that makes sense. Okay, so just for those of us on the podcast listening, Thomas just said Spring View component. I had that listed under our HTMX discussion. If that is not where it belongs, then maybe we can go ahead and talk about it. But so those are my templates. Again, if you're just building out, if you're if you're a Java developer and you're a Spring developer and you've built Spring MVC apps before, maybe you've just built like REST endpoints because you're kind of in that world. If you want to build a front end, we can start with the add controller annotation, right? And we can go ahead and use one of these template engines as a way to display our data. There are some other options out there, but I think this is a really good starting point.
And because Jonathan is here, and because it's something that I've been considering a lot lately, one of the things that we've done here is we have created this repo, and you guys our audience is doing pull requests. And one of the projects I made a Spring Batch project that's going to go and grab metrics from our Git analytics, our GitHub analytics. And I put that into a time series. And in my head, I could go and by default, I'm going to go and grab Vaadin, and I'm going to build some pretty graphs. But another thing, Jonathan, you asked me this, I could easily reach for Grafana. For a lot of the things that I'm building, a lot of the things that I'm doing, I could literally reach for Grafana and build these graphs and these views and these analytics. I could reach for Grafana. Where does that fit? Does it fit? Is that something that we should talk about here? Because Grafana makes, especially for time series data, it makes, and any metrics or analytics, it makes it really easy to consume. Jonathan, I'm asking you in the audience, where do you think that fits? Because I know from your presentation, right, that's a big part and it's valuable.
Yeah, we could, again, we're talking about being full stack developers, right? Part of that is the front end, part of that is the back end. We can't launch these applications without some type of observability there. So yeah, I think Grafana, Prometheus, Loki.
Right. Yeah. We have options.
Cool.
So yeah, I'm just throwing that out there. It's the time series, the way that we're dealing with data these days. I think you'd be hard pressed to not run into something time series. And do we really need to reach for much more when we have Grafana, especially for the time series stuff?
I got a question here from a good friend of the show, Todd. Is there a template engine that you know that is better at accessibility than others? I don't know the answer to that. Todd, you would probably know better than others. Accessibility really starts, with the developer's mindset, right? So,
but here's where Todd Libby is who we're talking to in chat. Here's where we could have a really good deep dive into what we learn here. What would be fun for me, Todd, with you, is to go through some of these and do a hello world, do like a demo using each of these options. And let's find out, which one's giving us the best opportunity for the accessibility route to make sure that we're checking that box. That is a great exercise if you're interested.
Can we put something on our Scala draw here about accessibility? I want to at least do a little research there and put some notes together in this document or this repo that we're going to have, because that's a really good point, Todd. Thank you. So yeah, I got another comment here from Thomas. Template engines don't really do anything about accessibility. It's more about using semantic HTML elements with the appropriate ARIA attributes. Not always ARIA, but again, semantic HTML, I mentioned that when we talked about HTML as a web developer. That is a really good start. But yeah, let's see if we can't add some information about that. So the next bucket I want to start with is HTMX, because so first off, you have Spring View component. Thomas had pointed out that Spring View component, I don't know where his comment is, but basically that it should belong as a template engine. So let me see. I'm just looking for Thomas's. I can't find his comment. Sorry, Thomas. But he said we should go ahead and just add that to the template engine, I think.
Which one?
Spring View component. I just want to make sure. I put it over
here. I put it under HTMX.
Yeah, he's saying maybe that's not where it goes.
Oh, okay.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas. I can't find your comment, but I think you said it would be using templates with the component model. So I think it would just go under a template engine.
Okay.
Okay, so HTMX, I didn't know like where this would fit as far as a bucket goes, right? Because it doesn't really have anything to do with a JavaScript framework. It doesn't really have anything to do with building, Java front ends in pure Java. It kind of fits into the template engine portion because we're going to be using it in there. But I just figured we'd start over here and maybe we can put it in a different place, right? So I gotta confess, I don't have a ton of experience with HTMX. I've watched some of Thomas's demos. I've watched you did an interview with Thomas as far as this goes. I went through that. But for me, as far as what is HTMX, really it's about progressive enhancement and being able to kind of swap out parts of the DOM without having to fully re-render the entire like payload, right? So an example of this might be, hey, I have a list of things and everything else on this page is static, but this list of things might be dynamic. So on the front end frameworks, we talk about this a lot. There are different component frameworks that do this called islands, where like this thing changes, but everything else is static. And I think of that similar to this. Like I have a static page. I might be using Thymeleaf and Spring MVC. I have all this content that's static, but this list of things may be dynamic and it needs to be updated. So we can basically call a server endpoint. We can refresh that data as we go. Jitter Ted saying, I have a bunch of stream videos on HTMX and a playlist on my YouTube channel. That's awesome. I know you. I've jumped on streams of yours, but where you were doing this, but I haven't watched them.
And the thing about, again, shout out to Jitter Ted. I highly, he's on our list. He thinks out loud and he takes questions, but he explains how things are connected. So, we talked about full stack. He explains how this resonates and that thread that goes between the front end and the back end. He does a great job of explaining HTMX in his streams. You should check it out.
Cool. There's
as the engine of application state. I think that was in reply to a question like, can we use it without a template engine? And yes, if you're using this concept, Hadios
Hadios.
Yeah, so you can do it this way.
Cool. Another good comment by Ted there. Let me go ahead and pull this up. HTMX is getting HTML from the server and putting it into specific areas of the page. Yeah, I know. I forget what front end framework called it this. Maybe it's Svelte. But the idea of islands, right? Like I have an island here. This thing, it lives on its own. Everything else is kind of outside of that island.
It brings me to, we talked about Matt Rabel. He's got a talk on this micro front end, right? That is very similar to that island concept. Depends, same thing by a different name, where like, hey, this is my component. This is how my component behaves. This is the front end for my component. And all the things that are needed for this component on the front end, this island on the front end, are handled in the same way. They're delivered with this same jar file, if you will.
Cool. Now so when we get into resources, when I go ahead and put this repository together, there are a couple good resources in HTMX, Thomas being one of them, Jitter Ted being another one. And there's a really good book out there. I don't have the link on me right now, but it will get into the repo on this. So we'll get some information in there. Again, this is me talking about HTMX at a high level. I don't have a ton of experience with it, but I just wanted to make everyone aware of it. So you can use it with things like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ted or Thomas, but you can use it with, I've seen it used with template engines like Thymeleaf, right? Thomas has examples with JTE in there. So you can sprinkle these little kind of HTMX attributes in your normal templates using something like Thymeleaf. And now it'll say, hey, like when you click this button to delete this, don't actually submit this form. Go ahead and use HTMX to go like just grab something from a server endpoint somewhere and then come back and return the payload for this and then swap out this particular DOM element with it. So yeah, cool. Use it with JTE. Here's a good comment. When you say islands, the same concept as Astro. So Astro is another big one. I know Astro is huge. I have not used Astro. Again, it just kind of speaks to the volume of the landscape of everything that we're talking about today. There are so many things to kind of know. I've not used it, but yes, I have heard of the concept of islands with Astro, and I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. Again, you want to build a static page, but this little piece needs to be dynamic. Oop,
yep, we were clicking the same thing at the same time, and we did it again.
Since Spring Boot is generating the HTML, you can use any template engine or generate the HTML yourself. Awesome. Another comment here. Nice thing about HTMX is its philosophy, using the locality of behavior to make it simpler to build complex reactivity UI with better DX. Thanks for that comment, Bruno. Oh, that's the one I was looking for, Ted. Wim, I don't know how to say his last name, has a book on HTMX. Yes, yeah. That's the book I was thinking of that I will get into the resources. You know, just doing some research for this show, DaShaun, I realized like how much I enjoy this stuff and that I need to get back into some of these projects. So I think things like Vaadin, Hilla, JHipster, HTMX, I got to get back into some of this and get some content together. So,
and you know, that concept of like, yeah, it's hard for us to stay on top of all these too. Yeah. One of the things that I'm going to ask, and I didn't talk about this before the show, one of the things that I would like to ask, if you're listening and you're doing front end and you're using Spring on the back end, what I would love to see, you create a video that says, here's how I use React with Spring. Here's how I build a React front end. Here's the patterns that I do. Here's the things that I put into place so that I can deliver React front ends for Spring Boot backends, or Vue, or Angular, or here's how I use JHipster. I would love to see our audience create nothing fancy. Just what are some of your tips and tricks? A 5-10 minute video. Like, share it with us. I want to hear how you're using these front ends for the backends. Beyond just here's the book, here's the video that I watch. I want to see your demo on how you're using these tools. Give us a little insight into how you're taking these things to production. I know that I'm not the only one that would love it.
Cool. All right, I have another bucket here that I'd like to start. This is the WebAssembly bucket.
Ooh.
Now, again, I'm afraid I don't have a ton of experience in this space, but again, we're just kind of talking about this at a high level. So WebAssembly, basically the ability to run code in multiple languages on the web, basically at native speeds, right? Like we're compiling down to native to run different types of applications. Do you have any experience with WebAssembly, DaShaun?
Yeah.
Or WASM, as we so.
This idea that we can take things and convert it, right? It ends up being JavaScript, right? This is what we're compiling it to. Or that WebAssembly, I believe it's JavaScript at the end of the day. And yeah, and this is what we're doing. I don't think it is, you know, Ambu says, hey, WASM is the new kid on the block. It's been around for a long time, right? Not new kid on the block. I might think that WASM has been running in production with companies that I know even longer than GraalVM images. It's this idea is we have another way of delivering. And there was not too long ago, Dr. Dave Sire came across one of these frameworks that was able to convert Spring applications, bytecode, into WASM. So they can be run in multitude of places, like out on the edge, right? There's a lot of now solutions for running WebAssembly, WASM code everywhere, right? And it gets us to that, back to the Java promise of write once, run anywhere. Well, now we have WASM. This is kind of trying to deliver that same promise. Convert your code to WASM and you can run it anywhere.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't know if we're that big time yet to be able to get Dr. Dave Sire on the show, but I'd be interested to get someone on the show to talk a little bit more about WASM, why we might want to use it. So if you're out there and you're a big proponent of WASM, let us know. I might even reach out to our friend Sergey, who just ran a conference in Barcelona called All Things WebAssembly, the WASM I/O. That was a conference in Barcelona just, I think, a month ago. So maybe I'll put that in the resources as well. But I would definitely be interested in talking to someone to learn a little bit more about ourselves. Because DaShaun, we are a little selfish on the show. We like to use this show to learn. So
I think that I think his talk was in 2022.
Dave
and
Sayers,
I will find there's
saw
a
that.
really good. He kind of goes into where we are, and things have obviously moved since then. But there's a good talk. I will make sure that.
I was going to
video
say,
gets linked.
I think that things have moved significantly since then because I need to look for it, but I believe there's another project out here that Dave is working on. So we'll have to see if we can include that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's things happening on the Spring side when it comes to some of the WASM technology. Cool. Okay, so that is all my buckets, I think. Can we think of any other technologies or buckets that we're missing?
Yep.
Before we kind of talk about a couple other things I wanted to get into.
Yep. I just added one, JavaFX.
Oh yeah.
So
that is great. Yep.
Of the things, of the outcomes from Dev Nexus, I was pleasantly surprised. And I shouldn't be surprised. I'm aware, but the amount of people that are doing JavaFX. So JavaFX is, it's delivered from the core Java team as a separate module that has its own release schedule. It's a way of delivering rich front-end experiences, kind of along that AWT swing. JavaFX, I guess, would be the line that I draw. To rich front-end that's pure Java. And there is a ton of stuff happening. And I was privy to several conversations last week of organizations that are still using JavaFX and taking it to production.
Nice.
And yeah, that definitely needs to be on here.
And this primarily is for building desktop applications, right? So maybe we could put it under like a desktop applications bucket.
Yeah, I don't know if you put all of these, right? The AWT, swing, you put those all into the same bucket as like, hey, we get this out of the box. We get this kind of as a core from Java. But these are options. These are ways that Pink Emma's here. Pink Emma's in the audience, and I know that, or I believe she is building Swing desktop apps. So sorry.
Yeah, I now that you mentioned that, like even at the university level, I'm still amazed that we're still teaching Swing. I'm not sure why it hasn't like transitioned over to something like JavaFX for doing those types of applications. So
yeah. Again, and one of the reasons, right? We get to see this all the time. Hey, why are we still using that old thing when new option is better? Because your company, your industry was built on top of it, right?
Yeah.
And things are working. We might need you to add a new feature here, but we're not doing, the big development. And that might be one reason why you still have, somebody earlier mentioned, what about Java applets? Right? Still a thing.
Yeah. All right, cool. So, yeah, those look like some really good buckets. I like all the different things we kind of put together. Let's take, before we answer some questions, I just want to kind of close out this discussion with a couple things. One, what are some things that you're going to have to look out for when we're talking about some of these different tools, right? I think one of the concerns you're going to have to talk about is, are we building a single artifact or multiple artifacts for the same application? Like, do we have a separate front end and a separate back end? I think whenever we get into like front end and back end applications, we got to think about cores and security. Security is a big one, right? I'm inundated with questions on Spring security and React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, whatever you're using. So there are some concerns there as well. And then specifically, I think questions that we'll want to expand on at some point are when to choose which option. And I think we've talked about this a little bit at a high level, and we're going to do that again here today. I think we could have a deeper discussion on this, but for me, what options or what option in this list provides the right features for the task at hand, right? So if I'm building like a static blog site that is like static HTML that I want to just put on the web, maybe it makes sense to use something like a front-end component framework that pulls that information down and statically generates that, right? If I'm building a back office application and I don't need to have SEO, SEO is not a big important role in this application, then maybe I don't care about how SEO, what that final output is. Team skills always comes into place, right? Like, what is our team makeup? I'm not going to make our team of 20 Java developers go learn Vue as much as I love it, if that's not the skill set that we have, right? So it is a combination of what are we trying to build versus what are the skill set of our team members. So I'm curious, like, kind of out of those two, like what things stick out to you?
Like, my main thing is coming in. Hey, sometimes we need to make our work visible. Sometimes we don't have a front end team to hand things off to, and we've got to take that responsibility on for ourselves. And there are some things that you need to think about. And this list of, hey, here's my concerns. Think about it. Just because, hey, it's a new cool thing, and I saw Josh Long working with it, that doesn't mean that's what you should take to production. Asking those questions. This is one of the things that I'm hoping that we are sharing and making known, is that there's more vectors for us to consider on our path to production now than ever. There's never been a better time to be a Spring developer because we have so many options. So ask up front, how much work do you want to put in to the front end experience? How much work do you want to run? Are you trying to show it off? Are you trying to put it in front of customers? Or is it for your back end, your admin? Are we going to be doing it a bunch of times, right? Is there a pattern here? Is this something that we want to continue to use? Are you going to bet the future development on this choice that you make? So we have a lot more options to consider. And
Yeah. You had just mentioned one there too. Like, one of the biggest kind of pros for separating the applications, right, the front end from the back end, is maybe our back end's pretty like solid, right? We're not changing it a lot, but the front end change of frequency happens a lot more. Do we want to deploy our entire application, take down our back end for everyone? Or maybe the front end is something we just like deploy 3-4 times a day because changes are happening there a lot. So, the typical concerns into like monoliths versus microservices, we're going to see in this space as well.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Right. You bring that up. One of the questions that we had early on is like, hey, let me go find it. What's your opinion on mono repos? Right? When we're having a front end conversation, do we put our front end with our back end? Do we deliver them the same way? And we've talked about it, and we've been talking about Spring Modulith as a way of kind of separating concerns and delivering applications in a modular monolith, having that mono repo. I don't say that there's one or the other. Different situations cause for different architectures.
Yeah.
Right? The way that you're delivering. So it's not a one or the other. And I'll say that if you'd asked me a year ago or 2 years ago, my opinion on a mono repo would be different. And now, I'll say fully because of Spring Modulith, my opinion on the mono repo has completely changed. My opinion on what approach I want to take to get to production has completely changed because by default, I knew how the microservice approach worked. My front end was always separate from my back end. I was able to throw things over the wall, or if I was building a front end, I could do it myself because I had all these options in front of me. But now, when I consider these other vectors, how many pipelines do I have to build? How many containers am I taking to production? How many repositories do I need to patch in order to stay on the latest and greatest and stay secure? Taking those things into consideration, my default today is I want to start with a mono repo. I want to start with a mono repo until I need to do something different, until I need to scale different or my team looks different. I'm going to start with a modular monolith.
Yeah, and like you said, like if I'm working on a solo project and I'm just a single developer, and maybe I want all my code in one place and one artifact that I deployed to production because I want to simplify things, right? But if you're at a team of 20, maybe that's not the case. So really, as with everything in our industry, it depends. Cool. We have some more questions here, so let's see if we can go ahead and get to these. Donald, did you have a chance to meet Donald in Atlanta?
I didn't get a chance to meet. I don't think that I did. And if I did, I wish I would have taken a selfie because I'm not sure. But Donald, I'm glad you're here.
He asks, how can I add a Spring CLI to an existing Spring Boot application? That's an interesting question. I don't know that you would want to, depending on what your Spring Boot application is doing. Like if you have a Spring Boot application that's serving up REST endpoints, like you probably want a separate project for your CLI, right? CLI is, hey, I want to build this command line tool that runs on my machine or your machine. We could even compile that down to a native executable, and it does a specific thing.
Well, there's a difference here, right? He asked about Spring CLI. Let's make sure that we're talking about the same thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he said Spring Shell. I'm sorry.
There's Spring Shell, and then there's Spring CLI. Spring CLI is a new tool. I think it's no longer experimental. Like we're using it across the board.
It's not. Yep.
And Spring CLI is a tool that I am using a lot by default to help my application move forward. It's a tool that I'm using. I'm not necessarily adding it to an application,
Correct.
but I'm using it to move my application forward.
Yep.
I'm using it with like the project catalog concept where I can pull in these best practices. I can pull in reference implementations to my existing project.
So you're installing Spring CLI as an application on your machine, Donald. And then what you can do is go into a project. So I've done this with AI lately, is I go in and I say, hey, Spring CLI, I want to add some AI capabilities to this project. And it will pull down the necessary code based on, whatever templates we're using. Similarly, the one example I saw was, hey, I want to add JPA to this project. And it pulls down the code and you get this nice diff. So you can go into your version control and see what it added. So Spring CLI is something you install on your machine and then go ahead and use to add capabilities to any project that you have.
So here's what I'm going to say about Spring CLI. I'm going to say it is not GA yet, but it is absolutely worth taking a look at today. It is absolutely worth taking a look at Spring CLI and what it can do for you and your team.
Cool. Another question from Ambu. Anyone still using Spring Webflow? I have not used it, so I'm not sure. I'm sure they are, but I'm not sure what that project is doing.
I'm trying to think if that's even still supported. Let me go take a look.
It is under the web. Yep. So we're at 3.0 on that.
So yeah, it has not come across my radar.
So yeah, the latest, there was a commit against that project 3 months ago. So, I mean, it is being updated. But no, I don't have a lot of experience with it, so I can't speak to that.
Okay. That's good.
All right.
We can talk about that more later on.
Yep. What are the pros and cons to deploy the front end in the Spring application in the given web server? So yeah, we talked about that. Like, hey, just it really depends on team makeup and what are some of the features that you want. Like, again, if kind of goes into architecture, right? Like, same things we talk about when we talk about, like, should this be a monolith or should it be a microservice? Like, what are some of the features that you're looking for? Like, is rate of change something on the front end that is going to be much different than the back end? Like, do I want to take down my whole service just to change the front end? Is changeability, maintainability, testability? These are all things that you need to think of when it comes to that. So I don't have a yes or no answer for you. But those are some of the pros, just kind of thinking of architecture in general. Those are some things that kind of come to mind.
This is a big topic that I've been talking a lot about lately as well, is this idea that, hey, I took a microservice architecture to production where my front end was separate from my back end, even if it was just two artifacts that I took to production. The idea that, hey, it's feature complete and we're just keeping the lights on. Does it still need to be two applications? There might be a time when you want to combine them into one. So that now you're just patching one application and you're maintaining one application, one less pipeline, one less artifact that's running in production, still giving you all the other benefits. You can scale it separately, but the less things, right? An important measure of what we're doing going forward is how easy is it to maintain? Do you want to maintain two or would you rather maintain one? That's a question. That's something to consider going forward. And for me and the customers that I'm having conversations with, that is a valid, relevant, current topic, is how many things do I need to be taking care of in production going forward?
Yep. Very good points. Okay, a couple more questions, and I think we'll kind of call it. What do you think about using JSON in a DB and using that JSON for front end with jQuery? There's a lot going on there. First off, jQuery should probably be on our list somewhere. It's still one of the most used frameworks everywhere.
Yep.
And you can use that right, in any of your applications. I have never stuck JSON in a DB to use on a front end and using that JSON for a front end. Are you translating that JSON into HTML? That sounds like an expensive operation. I don't know that I would do that. Maybe you have a specific use case for doing that. And if so, I'd love to hear it. But I think we laid out a whole bunch of options here. So I'd be curious to understand why you're doing that.
It wasn't so long ago that it seemed like every database was adding this JSON capability. Every database was JSON. Oh, we got support for JSON, and we're bringing it into the front end. And now, again, just on a relevant topic, now those same databases that have support for JSON now have vector support, right? Because times have changed. JSON support, I think, is almost a table stake, right? Where we're expecting that in our back end, but to take the data out of our database and put it directly to the front end, there's more questions to be asked, for sure. Donald, cool. I see your question here. Yes, you and I can pair. Grab some time on my calendar. I want to pair. I want to show you some of the cool things I've been doing.
When you have a large user base, is it better to use client-side front end to reduce the load on your server? So again, it depends on what load on your server means, right? Yep. Like if your entire page has to pull data from the server every single time, you still need that server and you're going to get load on that server. If you are displaying static data, sure, I think front end, is a really good use case for that. Using a front end framework that you can basically build a static asset for, put that on a CDN somewhere, and now you have a distributed CDN like all over the world, and everybody's just hitting static data, great. But maybe there's pieces that need to go out to the server. You're always going to hit the server if you need to get updated data, right?
Yeah, and how much can you bet on the client side? If you're doing a lot of things in your UI, are you always comfortable with the performance of that client side, device? Are they running on an iPhone? Are they running on an Android? Are they running on a Raspberry Pi that's out in the field? You have to take those things into consideration because sometimes, it's better. Let that client-side device handle all the processing and heavy lifting. But sometimes it's better to have it on the server side. Again, latency is the new downtime. Every millisecond matters. And your customers, you've got to get these things into the hand of your customers. Get feedback from your customers and then make that decision.
I think this is a layup for me, but we'll see. Which tech would you suggest to build a simple front end for internal use running on Java and an all Java dev team can learn quickly and implement? I'll let you take this one.
I'm going to say Vaadin. Start.vaadin.com. This is it's drop dead simple solution. This is the right answer. If you're a team, right? If I was to develop a little startup and me and my friend Dan are going to be the engineers and we've got this great idea that we want to take to production, we're going to reach for Vaadin, right? We're going to do that because we can stay in our comfort zone. We can get things to production and it's powerful, right? I'm not thinking of new ways that I can interface with my iPhone or my Android device. I'm trying to get something to production and I've got a team of Java experts. Of course, I'm going to lean into Java and Vaadin is a great tool.
Is Spring Web Flux a multi-threaded version of Spring MVC? Yeah, so Spring Web Flux came around reactive stacks came around 10 years ago to kind of solve the scalability issues of our traditional Spring MVC applications. So Spring Web Flux is a non-blocking I/O. So when we make a call to like a database or another HTTP service over the wire, it will not block the platform thread or the OS thread from doing other things, right? And that's a good thing. Now, on the Spring MVC side, we've talked about it a lot this year, over the last year. There is something called virtual threads in JDK 21 and in Spring Boot 3.2 to solve some of those scalability concerns. So I hope that answers your question.
I don't know if Charles was coming in here to just like troll or what. Charles says that Raspberry Pi should not be used in production. Charles, what is happening? I thought we were friends. I thought this was a safe place, but I feel attacked because I'm a Raspberry Pi enthusiast. But beyond that, in my career, I've been lucky to work. Raspberry Pis are powerful little devices, and depending on what you're doing, they are being used all over the world in production, in factories, on oil tankers, on towers. They are being used all over the world as production ready devices. And not only that, but you can actually now buy commercial support for your Raspberry Pis. There are tons of Raspberry Pis that are being used in production today. And I feel attacked a little bit that you would say such a thing. Raspberry Pi devices, right? It depends on your use case, but yeah, they're powerful tools.
All right, so I'm going to do one thing here. I'm going to go ahead and share out a repo that is basically empty right now. For those of you listening to us on the podcast, that is under our Spring-Office-Hours GitHub organization. But this is a resource for learning Spring front ends. This is not going to be completely updated tonight. This is something we're going to keep building on. I think, if anything, this episode, DaShaun taught me that we have all of these things that we talked about at a high level. I would like to go into these a little bit deeper in some future episodes. Again, things like HTMX, things like Spring View Component, again, kind of cover that. Things like WASM. So these are some things I'd like to go a little bit deeper in. And as we do, we're going to update this resource. So now if you're ever interested in like building a front end for your Java, for your Spring application, hopefully this will be a resource that'll help you out. So go ahead and start this repository for us. And once I get some stuff put in here based on today's episode, as always, pull requests are welcome. So you can go ahead and add these.
This has been fun. Right. I love this. I feel like
them.
I got some more things. I need to kind of refresh myself. But then again, I'm going to ask if you're using one of these tools, I don't really care how. I want to hear how. I want to hear how you're building front ends for your Spring Boot backends. Reach out. I would love to hear. I want to talk. I want to understand better. And yeah, we're having fun. We're going to learn from each other.
All right. And as always, DaShaun, if you are out there and you need help getting to production, who are you going to call?
Yeah. If you get stuck, give us a call. We're here to help. We are here to help.
All right. We got some fun things lined up. We'll get some things scheduled. And again, we're going to dive deeper into some of these. Thanks for our friends over at Cloud Foundry Weekly for joining us.
Yeah,
make sure you check out their show.
For hanging out with us. Definitely check out their show on Thursdays.
Yeah. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you guys had some fun, and we will catch you in the next one. See you, everyone.